Good morning, everybody. Hey, Bob, welcome. Hi, Taryn, welcome. Ruth, Denise, welcome. Hi, Sarah, Taryn, Mark, Shannon, welcome. Heidi, welcome. Julie, hi, Michelle. All right, everybody, we're going to give it about 2 minutes to get folks in and connected to audio. Enjoy the music while we wait. If you would, while we're waiting, please go ahead and drop where you're joining from today into the chat. Don joining us from Chicago, Denise in Florida. Aaron in Pennsylvania. We've got Connecticut in the house, New Hampshire. Heidi here in Michigan. Michelle from California. Nebraska in the house. Ohio. Washington State. Love it. Dory, Arizona. Got Bob in Delaware. Fantastic. Hi, Nuri, welcome. Robin, good morning. All right, Joey, let's go ahead and take down the sound. I will share my screen. All right, so good morning again. Welcome, or good afternoon, those of you in the Eastern time zone today. I definitely appreciate everyone joining. Honestly, I'm a bit humbled by the turnout that we've as far as registrations go. And so far, we're already up to almost 30 people in the room today. So I'm going to give it just another minute or so to get everyone in. And then we'll get kicked off. Again, if you haven't already, please drop your location, where you're joining us from today, into the chat. Noel, hi, and welcome. Thank you for joining today. All right. Got a lot of Michigan. Julie, thank you for joining. Hi, Keith, Elaine. All right. We've got a lot of coverage all across the U.S. today. Awesome. All right. So again, welcome everybody. Thank you so very much for joining today. Definitely appreciate all of your attendance and attention today. Let's dive right into this. Today, you're here to learn a little bit about how to facilitate a virtual training that doesn't suck. I thought it was a catchy title, above and beyond just a train the trainer. To give you a little bit of background, who I am and why I'm delivering this training course today. My name is Bernie DeSantis, and I am the owner of Insignia Training Partners. We are a full-service learning and development company that provides outsourced or fractional, that's the new word, right? Fractional support for training strategy, design, development, and deployment. And we focus primarily, for the last 4 years at least, on virtual training delivery. I'd like to also introduce our producer today, Joey. So Joey, give a quick wave up there in the corner, if you would. Thank you. So Joey has been with Insignia for about 4 years as a virtual producer, as well as an up-and-coming project manager. So he will be managing all of the logistics and back end of our meeting today. So if you do run into any technical issues or challenges, let's say coming off of mute or operating your camera, please send him a direct message through the chat. Okay. Now, as it pertains to our training today, a little bit of background. I started my career at Quicken Loans as a leadership development trainer. My focus in that role was on experiential learning. So for those of you who aren't familiar with experiential learning, what that basically means in very simple terms is creating engagement and immersion through activities and games. And so I have applied what I learned in that role to virtual production. Now, since the beginning of COVID, when obviously the world kind of shut down and everyone had to go virtual, Insignia Training Partners has helped companies both large and small to deliver over 5,000 engaging virtual training courses, workshops, and webinars. Some of our clients include some blue chip names that you'll know, companies like Ernst & Young, Johnson & Johnson, as well as McKinsey. along with some smaller boutique organizations like Gerard Training Solutions, the Trusted Advisors. Noel is here with us today, and I appreciate you joining today, Noel, and the Get Real Project. Now, I say all of that to say this. I have personally seen and experienced a lot of virtual training, and some of it was really quite good. However, if you're going to some virtual trainings, you will also see that a lot of it, unfortunately, is really quite bad. Things like people don't know where to put their camera. They don't know where to put their microphone. They have trouble opening breakout rooms, or they leave people in the waiting room for half the meeting. I have honestly seen quite a few dumpster fires, unfortunately. Now, within those events, I've coached a lot of facilitators on how to show up in Zoom and how to leverage the platform. And believe it or not, I still get clients who have never set up and run a Zoom meeting before, right? Literally, the first time that I'm working with them is the first time that they are managing a Zoom training, workshop, or webinar. And in all of the events that we've produced, I've never had a single facilitator ever come back to me and say that they would prefer to do it alone. And for those of you who have been doing it alone, you've probably come to a point where you feel like you're good enough. And I would challenge that to say that you can always get a little bit better simply by being more efficient and more effective at how you operate and run your meeting. And the truth is, you don't need to be a trained trainer to get great engagement and positive results from your virtual training program. Okay. You just need to show up properly on camera and understand the tool that you're using. Now, the course today is not going to be presented from the perspective of a facilitator, which again, I am, but it is going to be presented today from the perspective of a virtual producer and some of the things that we have seen successful presenters do and utilize while they are delivering their online training program, okay, their virtual training. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. First thing that we're going to do is a quick activity, get everybody kind of warmed up. This activity is called Who's With Me? Okay. And all you have to do is locate your reactions button, which should be along the bottom panel of Zoom there, and locate your raise hand. And Robin, you've already found it. Looks like Bruce, you found it as well. Fantastic. All right. So if you would please pause on the raising the hands. Joey, go ahead and clear those. I'm going to ask you a series of a couple of questions or make a few statements. And if those apply to you, then please raise your hand. Okay. So the first question is, if you are connected to today's session, which if I'm in earshot, right, you can hear my voice through Zoom, you are connected, please go ahead and raise your hand. So I should quite literally see every single person's hand go up. Very good. All right, looks like most of you have located that button. All right, fantastic. Question number 2. If you're joining today from the Eastern or Central time zones, please raise your hand. All right, looks like we have almost half. All right, East Coast is being represented very well. Fantastic. Joey, if you would please clear those. Now, if you're joining today from the Mountain or Pacific time zone, please raise your hand. All right, so about a third, give or take. Very good. Thank you very much. And lastly, if you're joining today from anywhere else in the world outside of the US and our 4 time zones here, please go ahead and raise your hand. All right, we've got a few of you. All right, so my training today is going international. I'm really, really stoked about that. All right, so Joey, if you would please clear those. Thank you. So fantastic. Now that you know where the raise hand feature is, if you do have a question or want to add a comment throughout the course of today's training, please raise your hand and we will call on you and bring you off of mute. However, I will add that for the sake of time, because we only have an hour today, if you do have any questions that you'd like me to address, please feel free to use the chat, pop them in there, and we will circle back to those as we go throughout the training session today. Now, a couple points that I want to make. In a Zoom meeting, you want to make it very clear how your participants can comfortably come off of mute without the fear of speaking over someone. So giving them that initial direction of what they should do, in this case, raise their hand, so that they can participate. Okay. Now, if you're using a Zoom with a webinar, you may have 50, 100, 1,000 people who show up. In that case, you will have a forced mute. Okay, and participants can only be unmuted by the host of the event or the producer. So you want to have some type of a process in place where they can be identified that they want to participate, and then you can bring them into the conversation. Okay, so thank you for your participation in that exercise. I appreciate it. So talking about objectives, our objective for today is really only one objective. We are going to identify some virtual facilitation best practices and some of the engagement features that you can use within Zoom that you can implement immediately into your next virtual engagement to get more engaging with your participants. Okay. So setting the tone. These are the ground rules for today's training. We're going to participate and interact. I would absolutely appreciate if you are willing and able to please come on camera and participate in any of the activities that we do today. Would like for you to share your knowledge, experience, and any best practices that you may have and that I don't personally cover. Again, use your camera and the platform features. It is really great practice to be familiar with it. Of course, show respect to others and avoid any distractions that could draw you away from the presentation today. So if you would please locate your annotation function. You'll locate that by clicking on View Options, which should be at the top of your screen, selecting Annotation, and then use the stamp feature to indicate the ground rules, one or two that you would think are most important and would like the group to adhere to today. Again, just one or two, and I'll do the same thing. So I'm going to click on Annotate. I'm going to select the stamp feature, and for me, it's going to be number 1 and number 5. Participate and interact today and avoid distractions. So I'll wait for you guys to get a few of those in. Seeing quite a bit around number 1, participate and interact, a bit about number 2, sharing your knowledge. Good, showing respect for others and avoiding distractions is getting quite a bit of traction there as well. Fantastic. So we'll let those continue to come in. So I'm going to pose a quick question for you, and please feel free to pop your answer into chat. Why is it important to get the group's consensus on the ground rules? Why is it important that people understand how they can participate? So I'll take a moment, let you guys pop something into chat. So Terrence says, so they're more invested in what's happening. Absolutely. If they know how to participate, they are more likely to participate. If you understand what the ground rules are, right, the rules for engagement, you're more likely to have people play within the lines. Robin, setting expectations. Very good. Ashley, staying focused. I love it. Sharon, so you can have control of your audience and be able to deliver the content smoothly. Absolutely. Mark, so the speaker stays on course without distraction. Absolutely. Additional value adds, becomes a discussion instead of a one-sided conversation. Absolutely. Gets everybody involved. Excellent. Establishing group norms and sets the expectations so people can relax. All very good answers and all true. Now, the one that I would like to highlight for you as a virtual producer speaking on facilitation is how many of you are working from more than one monitor today by raise of hand. So if you're working from more than one monitor today, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, there's a few of you. More than a few of you. Here we go. Starting to see them come in. All right. So about half. Okay. So I personally operate from 7 monitors, and I'm not saying that for shock value. I am saying that because there is plenty that could potentially distract me as a participant to a workshop, webinar, or training course, right? So Zoom occupies at least one monitor for you. If you have more than one monitor, there are plenty of other things that could potentially distract, right? I have my email open in another one. I have Teams open over here. I have Slack open over here. I have LinkedIn open over here. Any one of those things can potentially distract me from what I have going on in front of me in the Zoom. So it's always important to help people to recognize that they should close out those distractions, right? Close any additional things that they have open. Now, the flip side of that, how many of you are operating from just one monitor today? Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, there should be at least the other half, right? Because I said more than one and now only one. So for those of you who are operating from only one, as a participant, that's actually a really good thing, right? There's less things that you can potentially be distracted by. Okay. You will have to actively go in and click on a different web page or application in order to go to those things. However, as a facilitator, I highly, highly recommend that you purchase a second monitor, even if it is a small portable one that's plug and play, because as a facilitator, if you are sharing your screen, it's going to actively take up the entire single monitor. And you may have other things that you need to do while you're facilitating, right? Sharing your screen, operating a different website. There are other things that you may have to do, and having that additional monitor gives you the flexibility to be able to do that. Okay. So highly recommend that second monitor if you have the opportunity to get one. Again, plug and play ones are fantastic. Oftentimes they're touchscreen as well, which is really nice. All right. So let's move on. Agenda today, Joey, if you can please clear the annotations. The agenda today is we're going to share some best practices, and I'm going to show you what I find to be at least a funny clip. We're going to talk a little bit about in-person versus virtual training today. We'll talk about leveraging the virtual platform and some of the features that we'll be able to use, and then we'll have a quick wrap up. Yes, Taryn, have 7 too, and I absolutely think that I would lose my mind if I took even one of them away at this point. You just get so used to having multiple, right? All right, so let's move along. All right, so we're going to kick off with a polling question. Joey, if you could please launch that polling question. What is your level of confidence in your ability to facilitate virtual training courses? Okay, if you have high confidence, obviously select that, and that's fantastic. Hopefully we can share a couple of best practices or pointers that you can implement. If you're in the moderate or low, my goal today is to help you to move either to moderate or high, at least higher. Okay, so we'll give just another 15 or 20 seconds, get everybody in. Looks like we're missing just about 3 responses. All right, Joey, go ahead and end the poll and share the results, please. So a majority of you are in that moderate confidence category, which is great, right? That means that you've recognized that there are some areas of opportunity for you, although you do feel confident in your ability to facilitate. Again, if you're at that high confidence level, you may not take a ton from today, but hopefully I can deliver a couple of best practices that you can implement and get just a little bit better. And those of you who are at a low confidence level, my goal is to move you at least to that moderate confidence level. Okay. All right, so let's move along. Here's our next participation opportunity. What are some examples that you have personally witnessed or experienced that made a virtual training session bad? Right? We've all experienced some of those things. And I'll even toss the first one out there, which is that the presenter maybe seemed unprepared or unfocused. So Taryn says people coming off mute, being a distraction. Absolutely. Poor bandwidth, Karen. That's actually a really good one. That's not necessarily something that's within your control either, unfortunately, right? The title didn't match the actual presentation. Technical difficulties, right? Agree on the unfocused point from Don there. Great. Reading from a script. Yeah, absolutely. If it feels like they're reading, it certainly doesn't feel very genuine, Heidi. I agree with that. Noel, presenter looking away from the camera the whole time. Absolutely, right? It seems like they are not looking at you in the eye. Zoom bells every time someone comes in. Nuri, I agree. That's actually one of my pet peeves. However, sometimes it's hard to recognize if somebody comes into the waiting room if you don't have that going, right? So there's a plus and minus to that. Thinking they're sharing the deck and they aren't. Yeah, absolutely, Dory. Presenter was scattered, Bob. Yep. Busy slides. You might see 1 or 2 busy slides today. The presenter was not engaging the audience enough. Bruce, letting technology take over and causing problems. Jennifer Price, all talking for the presenter, little to no participation or engagement. 100% agree. So all of these are fantastic answers. And, you know, it is unfortunate that a lot of folks, they will experience these challenges as a facilitator. They'll get that very feedback, but then their very next facilitation, they still do the exact same thing. They don't make any changes, right? And maybe it's they're just comfortable in their rut, right? They understand what they're good at or what they're not good at, and they are willing to accept that level of quote unquote good enough. So some other things that I came up with and will obviously reflect some of the things that you guys have mentioned. Again, the presenters don't know how to use the platform. They don't read the chats. They're not asking for participation. There are technical issues, video or audio issues, difficulty logging in. Maybe there's poor transitions to the activities, waiting around for something to happen. It doesn't start or end on time. That's one of my huge pet peeves. And maybe the speaker, they're just, like Ben Stein and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. They're just frankly boring. And I'll also say this. I've actually witnessed quite a few people that I would say are boring facilitators, right? They don't have a whole lot of personality when they're delivering, but they still do a very engaging training program because they understood how to leverage the platform, right? And get people engaged in the presentation. All right. So got to click one more time. Let's talk about some best practices for your virtual facilitation. So we're really going to focus on 3 particular topics here in this portion: preparation, technology issues, and time. Okay. So when it comes to preparation, class management has as much to do with how you prepare for your session as it does what you do during your presentation or training delivery. Okay, so some things that you can do to prepare. And many of you are probably already doing some of these things. Things like reviewing your material, and do that at least 2 to 3 days in advance of your meeting. And I recommend even a little bit further in advance of that, because if you do need to make changes, you want to have time to integrate those changes and do a couple of rehearsals with those changes so that you're familiar with what that new structure of the deck is. In line with that, have a rehearsal. No matter how familiar you are with the content, take the time to practice with your producer, if you have one, or your co-facilitators, so that everyone knows what their role is and what should be happening throughout the course of that presentation. Make sure that during that rehearsal, you're practicing all of your tech features and anything that you'll be using throughout the course of that training. Be sure to take note of any of those technology difficulties, right? Things like slow transitions or hiccups, and be sure to discuss them, again, with your producer or co-facilitators in advance of your training session. As a facilitator and talking about your space, make sure that you reduce or eliminate any of the distractions in your environment beforehand, right? Now, many of us are working from home and not everyone has a dedicated space. Many of us have children. Many of us have pets. There are delivery people that show up at your door at random times, right? There are going to be things that happen that are not necessarily within your control, but do whatever is within your control to at least minimize any of those distractions in your environment. It makes a huge difference in your level of focus in delivering your presentation. From a timing perspective, be sure to arrive to your presentation, right, in your Zoom meeting or Teams meeting at least 30 minutes in advance for your virtual session. You want to make sure that you're able to do tech checks, right? You want to make sure that your camera is working properly. You want to make sure that your microphone is working properly. And you want to have the opportunity, again, to test any of the features that you're going to be using that day. And trust me when I say you would much rather have 25 minutes to spare of that 30 minutes, knowing that everything is working properly, than have only 5 minutes to showtime and know that you have unaddressed issues. Okay. So let's move along to technology. Now, technology, it's great when it works, but it doesn't always work, right? Let's just be honest. No matter what your best efforts are, sometimes technology isn't going to play the way that we would like it to. Now, I will say that, we've come to a time now over the past 4 years since the beginning of COVID where we're not seeing things like Zoom bombing anymore. And, for the most part, we're familiar with what most of the features are. But there are issues that could come up. Things like poor internet, which was mentioned earlier, right? Your connectivity could make your video or audio start to come and go. You could have difficulty in sharing your deck during the presentation. Your features aren't working properly. Participants aren't able to join the session at all. I saw a lot of that in early COVID. And I definitely highly recommend that you take the time prior to your session to update and restart your computer, and only have programs, applications, and windows open that you're going to need during your delivery, right? Don't have those additional distractions. Now, again, keep in mind that these type of occurrences, things that could potentially happen, are becoming less and less, more and more rare. But most of these challenges can be handled by the host or the producer in the session. Okay, simply by having your attendee log out and log back in. Okay. Now, I will say that you want to take the time to prepare for those issues, right? Have some contingency plans. And one thing that I'll recommend is audio issues. People will put up with bad video. They will not put up with bad audio. So be prepared to switch to phone audio if you start to experience some latency or internet bandwidth issues. What that will do for you is remove that audio from your internet bandwidth, and it will move it to your cellular data on your phone and giving you a dedicated audio line as opposed to all being on your internet connection. Okay. And I would also further recommend that if you do have co-facilitators or a producer, make sure that they have a copy of your deck as well. Sometimes something as simple as sharing the deck can reduce your internet connectivity and your ability to share smoothly. Okay. Have somebody who has a copy and can share on your behalf. Now, it's also very important to be as relaxed as possible should any of these issues arrive. In most cases, majority of your participants will have no idea there are problems unless you identify it as a problem. You can usually handle a lot of those things behind the scenes. So I'm going to pause for just a second because I did see a hand go up and then come back down. I believe it was Noel. And yep, there you go. And raise hands, apparently. So Noel, if you'd like to come off of mute, I'd certainly like to invite you to come on out and share some of your knowledge.
Yeah, that was thanks. That was the chat that I put in there before was don't take your eyes off the keyboard if you have a cat hanging around. Because my cat chats and raises my hand and has been known to send emails and create new appointments in my calendar.
Wow, that is a very active cat. And I actually do know that that stuff happens to you because when we work together, I see your cat run across the screen sometimes.
You've experienced my cats.
Yes. I have indeed. I have indeed. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to timing, right? So A1 rule, make sure that you start and end your sessions on time, right? If you respect your participants' time, they are more likely to respect you and your delivery, and they're going to focus on the learning and engaging with you throughout the course of your training. Okay. If you do have a detailed or timed agenda, make sure that you're referring to that agenda for your timing. Now, you of course can be flexible, and especially for those of you who are running workshops where a lot of that engagement relies on participation and conversations from your participants. But be careful not to go down rabbit holes, right? Because you have certain objectives that you need to cover throughout the course of your training program. So you want to make sure that you are diligent in managing the amount of time that's spent on some of those sidebar conversations, because when people get passionate about the topic that they're talking about, it's very easy to spend 10, 15, 20 minutes talking about that topic, and then you're not able to, right, get everything done that you'd like to do in your training course. Be careful about ad-libbing too much as well, right? Now, if you really know your content, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Being a little bit flexible is a good thing. However, if you're not super familiar with your content, really avoid ad-libbing too much, because again, you can end up going down those rabbit holes and then not being able to get all of the objectives for your training covered. I will further recommend that you take the time to direct your participants to refer to any participant materials that are provided for additional details above and beyond what is going to be delivered by you verbally in the training course. Especially if questions start coming up and you recognize that it could take you down that rabbit hole and derail you from your delivery. Again, from a timing perspective, if you have the ability, use a timer on your phone or even on the computer to help you stay on track as far as your timing goes. Now, virtual courses that typically run less than 2 hours will not have a scheduled break. However, if it's going to be more than about 90 minutes to 2 hours, you do want to schedule a break, and be sure to share a timer on screen so everyone's on the same page as to when they need to return for that training. Okay. Now, if you need to really stay on task and on time, I always encourage participants to use the chat, or if you're in a webinar, the Q&A as a parking lot, so you can circle back to those questions if they're not addressed throughout the course of your presentation. So I'm going to pause again for a second. I see a hand up, Sharon. If you'd like to come off of mute, love to hear from you.
Yeah, Bernie, one question. Do we have a timer in Zoom, or would we need to use an external timer, let's say?
So there is a timer application within Zoom that you can either share on screen or you can keep kind of behind the scenes, but obviously you can feel free to use your phone as well. I've done that in the past.
Yeah,
So
because I know that there's a timer visible for participants in breakout rooms,
there is.
but I'm not sure if there's something for the main room.
There is actually. So if you go to your lower panel and click the apps button, there is a timer app. And if you download it and engage it, you can set a timer and you can put it on screen and it shows up just like that, or like that rather.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And you can share it with everyone, or you can keep it behind the scenes just for you. There's both a timer as well as a stopwatch feature, and you can decide whether or not you want to share that with your participants.
And again, where can I find that?
So that will be in the apps section. If you go along your lower panel there in Zoom, you should have an apps button. If you click on apps, it will be called the timer.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your question. All right. So is there any other questions or commentary around preparation, technology issue, or timing within your training program? Let me refer back over to the chat as well.
Yeah, I've got 2 questions in the chat, Bernie. If you want, I can let you know what those are. We can address
please
those.
moderate if you would.
Yeah, the first was from Noel a little bit ago. The question was, can you share how to turn off annotator names for anonymity? Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah, right. So when you are sharing your screen and you go into the annotation feature, you go to, where was it? And I will be the first person to admit that as much as I'm in Zoom, there are features that I don't use every day or all the time. So actually, Noel, I'm going to flip it back over to you because I know this is something that we typically use within our trainings, if you don't mind. Do you recall exactly where that is? Here we go. No, that's not it either. So I will circle back to you guys on that one and give you an answer, but there is an option to eliminate the person who's sharing so their name doesn't show up on screen, and it can be anonymous. I will circle back to that. Joey, we had another question.
And we had one more question from Haley. And she says, how do you approach scripting, not scripting for extensive, highly technical software trainings, what she designs? She finds that not scripting fully makes it so that trainers often go off course and timelines aren't met, but being too scripted feels robotic and restrictive for the facilitator. Like, how do you find that balance?
You know, a lot of that is going to be dependent on the individual facilitator, right? There are a lot of folks out there that absolutely love to go from the hip, right? And if they are super familiar with the content, that's really not an issue, right? Because they can circle back and know where they need to land. If they are somewhat inexperienced facilitators or newer to the role, you really want to try and keep them as close to, I'll say, the script as possible, right? Those facilitator notes. Because again, if they are not an experienced facilitator, it's very easy to ultimately get derailed and then not be able to get back on track and cover your objectives. And Noel, you still had the forced mute, so I will ask you to unmute.
Sorry, I'm multitasking because I have a delivery at 1 o'clock. Bernie, I think it's in your settings. I think it's under the more button. If you hit your 3 dots in the bottom tray, or it might be in the 3 dots on the annotate tray. This is an updated annotate tray.
Yeah. No, not sure. We'll have to circle back to that one though. I know that it is an option and it could have been changed with another update. The side panel is a recent update as well. The annotation toolbar looked a little bit different previously as well. So I will locate that and share that out to you guys. All right, so let's talk about some basic blocking and tackling, right? Some stuff that I've noticed throughout the course of the 4 years that I've been producing that you would think would be pretty intuitive, but unfortunately, sometimes it's not. I go to a lot of trainings where unfortunately the facilitator stays off camera, right? When they're starting their presentation, it sounds like they are talking through a fishbowl, as if they have never recorded themselves and listened to themselves back, right? The quality of the audio is really bad. So I don't typically recommend that you read all of the bullet points on screen, but I think that these are worthwhile. So I am going to touch on each one of these points briefly. So first and foremost, showing up on camera in and of itself is engaging, right? We're all familiar with the model of words, tone, and physiology, right? As far as communication or your body language, 55, 38, and 7%, right? So the words are that heavy part, right? Or excuse me, that really low part, 7%. 38% is your tonality. And then 55% is communicated through your body language. So knowing that model, why would you ever facilitate off camera? There really is no reason, right? So you want to make sure that you are on camera. And when you're leveraging your camera, as much as possible, you want to try to look into the camera because that does simulate eye contact. And eye contact, again, is engaging. So try to look into that camera. When it comes to centering yourself, right, framing yourself, I actually learned a new trick recently from one of my facilitators that I work with. And what he told me is that when you're on screen, take 2 to 3 fingers, put them on the top of your head. And if the distance between the top of your head and the top of your frame is about 2 to 3 fingers, you're framed properly. Anything more than that is just a little bit too much. And you should either try to move into your camera a little bit, or if you have a camera that zooms, zoom in a little bit. Moving on to background and lighting. I am a person who personally prefers to use a virtual background. One of the reasons that I do that is because the background behind me, my actual space, is very cluttered. Okay. It's not a neutral background and it can be distracting. But honestly, I also like to have a little bit of branding as well. Okay. So if you do have a neutral or uncluttered background, feel free to turn off that virtual background. But if you know that it's going to be distracting to your participants, use a virtual background. Secondly, another thing that I see a lot of is people do not face their light. They have lighting behind them, which casts a shadow and it gives them the witness protection look, as I like to call it. So avoid having bright lights behind you. And whenever possible, try to have your camera in front of a window and leverage natural lighting from the outside. It really helps to brighten your face. I am a huge proponent of ring lights. I personally use 2. I have them on opposite sides of my camera, so it shines in on me. Always have some type of light source shining on you to highlight your face and body as you're speaking. Okay. Julie says, also wear appropriate clothing. No tube tops or strappy tops for women. I've supported virtual summits where women have looked topless. Absolutely agree with that, Julie, unless, of course, that's what you're going for. All right. Now, when we're talking about audio issues, obviously there is going to be some background noise if you're working from home. It can happen. It can pop up at any time. I am a huge fan of the background noise cancellation and echo reduction features in Zoom. Highly recommend that you use them. I use the high setting, and it eliminates virtually all background noise that I might experience in my home. I have 2 dogs that randomly love to bark, and you will never hear them in one of my virtual trainings because I utilize this background noise cancellation. Okay. When it comes to your microphone, this is subjective to you as an individual. We all use different equipment. So the distance that you need to put your microphone or where you need to put your microphone is going to be different from one person to the next. I recommend that you take the time to practice. Record yourself several times at different distances so that you can understand how you sound when you are facilitating. And I would also have someone join you in that test so they can give you feedback as to how you sound, and you can make appropriate changes as necessary. And then lastly, as far as actually communicating, make sure that you're speaking slowly and clearly so that people are able to understand what it is that you're delivering. On to the fourth category. Most people, when they deliver in person, they have a little bit of adrenaline, right? A little pep in their step, a little bit of extra excitement. But sometimes when people show up to virtual, they're forced to sit the entire time, right? And so they lose out on what they would feel is a little bit of that adrenaline, that little extra energy. And I would argue that when you're facilitating virtually, again, going back to that communication model, you want to come with 115, 125% of the energy that you would typically deliver in person, because so much of what you do is going to be off camera, right? You're only seeing my head and shoulders and a little bit of what I'm, doing with my hands. And I am Italian. I do talk with my hands regularly. So if I'm not using my hands when I'm talking, you won't get the full value of what I'm trying to deliver. So if that's also you, don't be weird and just randomly bring them into frame like, Will Ferrell in Talladega Nights, right? I don't know what to do with my hands. But if you are somebody who typically engages your body language, you're communicating, make sure that you're doing that in your virtual training as well. Okay. Make sure that you're smiling, those type of things make a difference, and they are engaging. And then lastly, again, make sure that you have a positive mindset and actively think about how you can bring your participants into the discussion as much as possible. And again, it doesn't always need to be verbal. They don't always have to come off of mute to say something. It can just be the annotation tools or those chat features or any one of the other features that we'll talk about today. Right. So I'm going to pause for a moment and poll the room. Do you have any additional questions, or what questions do you have around lights, camera, action, or preparation, time management, and technology issues? And I'm actually going to stop share for a minute and bring us to gallery mode so I can see everybody for a second. Hey, John, there you are. Thanks for joining us today, brother. Appreciate you. Sharon.
Hi, Bernie, something I have found, because I'm not the facilitator, but I'm normally the producer. So something that I find really, really useful is to, if anything happens related to technology, that always happens. If we're gonna play a video and it's not working, if there's no sound, if anything weird, just keep the audience informed. Like, let them know, okay, we have a technical issue here, we're solving, or we go to that video soon. I think that helps a lot, because those awkward silences when people do not know what's happening. I mean, what's happening, but your audience doesn't know. It's very helpful to keep them informed. So that's a good practice that I have learned and always have on top of hand.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. If it's an issue that comes up and it's something noticeable, it makes more sense to address it and let people know what you're doing about it, and or having, again, that contingency plan or backup so that you can fill that space. But the truth is again, most people aren't going to notice that there's truly an issue unless you make it a big deal. And again, if you're prepared, you have those backup plans, you know what to do in the event of an issue, they become less of an issue. So 100% agree with you, Sharon. Very good. Any other comments, questions, concerns, philosophies on life, Taryn?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I try to get centered like before I'm facilitating to try to bring the energy. I'm just wondering for you, Bernie, is there something that like a mantra or something that you do to center yourself before you go facilitate something?
So, one thing that I try to do is do a little bit of box breathing, right? Just to take a moment to center myself a few minutes before the event. I won't say full on meditation, but taking the time to center yourself is very, very important, right? Because if you are frazzled, that will absolutely come through in your presentation of the content. So highly recommend just taking a few minutes beforehand, maybe doing a little bit of calisthenics as well, getting your body moving a bit. I heard in my past life that motion creates emotion, right? So getting your body moving a little bit before your event helps you to deliver your presentation with a little bit more emotion and personality behind it. Thank you for that question and comment. I appreciate it, Taryn. Michelle King, over to you.
Sorry, had to unmute first. So one thing I would say that I use if I have a large audience, especially if the audience is really diverse, so maybe I have people from different countries, is I like to do a check-in at the very beginning. So I'll have like a poll or something else that they can go to and just like have them give me a word for how they're doing, or would do like a red, yellow, green. And really this helps me take the pulse of kind of the audience at the time and say like, hey, if I've got a lot of people where I see a lot of words that say like tired, exhausted, I'm like, all right, the temperature is really important, because if you're going in full throttle and you can see that half of your audience is saying they're exhausted, you might want to switch it up a little bit and kind of give them some opportunities to kind of take things in a little bit more before you start moving on to the next thing. So that's the other thing, is like, because we're virtual, we don't see each other in person, so I can't read all your body language, so I don't know what's going on with you. And I think it's an important thing, and also it lets people release that emotion before they start learning. And one of the most important things that I will say about all training, but specifically facilitating virtually, is that you don't really know what's going on with people at the time, and it's your responsibility as the facilitator to kind of get an idea of what's happening so that you can present to this audience exactly the best way for them.
Yep.
So that's just one of my suggestions, one thing I use.
Absolutely. Great advice and feedback. I appreciate that, Michelle. Thank you very much for sharing. And we'll take one more question or comment. Jessica, I see your hand up.
Hi, yes. Hi, Bernie.
Hi, Jessica.
My question is, I will be facilitating a 4-hour training. This will be my first time. And I printed out the script and been studying it. But what is your advice? I feel like I want to have the script handy, or should I read it on the screen?
So I would probably advise against reading it on screen. What I would probably recommend is to create a list of bullets of the main topics that you want to cover from that script, right? Have it maybe off to the side, something that you can reference, but bullet points. And again, if you're practicing and rehearsing, it will start to come more naturally, and use those bullet points as your cue to go into that topic. Now, if you're talking about a half day or a full day, it's probably not realistic for you to memorize everything. But again, having those bullet points will jog your memory as to what you should be discussing during those points. Me personally, what I do is I will put all of my notes into the deck. And then as I'm sharing my screen, I have the little notes section hovering right below my camera. So it always looks like I am looking at least pretty close to the camera, but I have those bullet points that I can refer back to jog my memory on what should come back next. Does that help?
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
You're very welcome. All right. So we have about 12 minutes left in our class today. So I am going to scoot us right along, right? So I can keep us on time. Let me reshare my deck. And Joey, if you would please launch the next polling question. So want to do a knowledge check. I just shared a bit of information, right? Some best practices around being on camera. So while on camera, what should you consider for background and lighting? Joey, did I lose you? He is in the waiting room. How about that? My producer got booted. Bringing him back in. And in the meantime, I will go ahead and launch the poll. There we are. Well, hey, Joey, welcome back.
Hey, welcome back. We've got a 30-mile-an-hour winds here that knocked my power out.
Harsh reality, guys, right? That stuff happens. All right. So looks like the answers are rolling in here on the chat. So I'll share a little secret with you guys. It's really all of the above. Those are all things that you should be paying attention to. And other, Michelle, what you're wearing. Yeah, absolutely. What you're wearing is important as well, you know, to Julie's point earlier as well. Awesome. All right, let me go ahead and share those results and move us along. All right, so a quick fun video. If you guys haven't seen this before, it is of a gentleman who is called into court, and he has a filter engaged and is unfortunately not able to turn it off. So there we are. We're not.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
We're
a look.
trying to, can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but
Oh, come on.
I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click the up arrow next to this.
I don't know. Me personally, I love the guy in the top right corner. He's barely paying any attention. And then all of a sudden, when the guy says, I'm not a cat, you see this little grin go up on his face. So, you know, the moral of the story here, guys, is don't be this guy, right? Be very careful about what features you're using within Zoom. Make sure that you're familiar with them. You've practiced them. You know how to use them. And a secondary best practice, if you have children who play on your computer and play with Zoom, be very careful with that, because they may put a filter on unbeknownst to you. And next thing you know, you come on camera and you have a mustache when you're not supposed to, like me. All right. So engagement tip. Throughout the course of the training today, you have seen me use polls, use chat, use annotations. Haven't used breakout rooms, and I don't know that we'll have time to do that necessarily today. We've used raise hand features. I've seen some of you use emojis as well. You know, I highly recommend using a feature to engage your audience roughly every 3 to 7 minutes, or 10 minutes at kind of the outset. And that's not to say that you need to run 7 polling questions in your 60-minute training. Okay, you want to mix it up a little bit. Maybe it's 1 or 2 polling questions. It's a couple of chat prompts. Maybe it is a breakout room. It's inviting people to come off of mute. And I highly recommend regularly asking some closed-ended questions and having your participants use the reaction button. Okay, this will help people to remain engaged in the platform, and by extension with you and what you're talking about. Okay, so I'm not going to go through every bullet on screen, and I know that I'm breaking a cardinal rule by having so much on screen here. If you're so inclined, feel free to read some of the differences of in-person versus virtual. But if you've delivered in person and you've delivered virtually, you know what those differences are, right? However, I believe that virtual training can be equally, if not more efficient than the physical classroom, particularly in terms of travel, time, and costs, right? However, I will say this: to ensure that your virtual training is effective, it does need to be designed and delivered with virtual engagement in mind. Just like the physical requirements of an in-person training, right? The size of the room, how many tables you can fit, how many people should be at each table, is there a whiteboard, is there a projection screen? All of those things that you would consider for an in-person, you need to think about the equivalent in your virtual training, okay? You need to design your training to leverage the virtual platform, okay? In order for it to be a really good virtual training, you need to have good virtual course design, good virtual facilitation skills, and, you know, not to be too pitchy, but TV shows, movies, radio shows, podcasts all have a producer so that they can have a smooth delivery, right? They are the person behind the scenes, the Wizard of Oz pulling the levers. Highly recommend having that support person when you are delivering virtually as well. So really quickly, again, we're running short on time. what are some similarities that you can identify between in-person and virtual training, right? So many people focus on all of the differences and why they don't like one versus the other. What are some of the things that are exactly the same or very, very parallel to those two? Engagement is critical. Absolutely. The learning objectives need to be met. Base content is the same. Asking questions for participation. Absolutely. There are distractions, whether or not you're in person or virtual, right? If you could be in person and one of the wait staff drops an entire tray of plates and dishes, well, that's going to be a distraction. Okay. Technology issues are not just relegated to the virtual environment, right? We are facilitators with information to share. There will be lots of people there who learn. There are lots of ways to engage, right? Different learning styles need to be engaged, checking in for participation and understanding. There's some type of knowledge check throughout. Absolutely. All really good stuff, guys. The facilitator is and should be the expert. Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you for that participation, everyone. All right, so leveraging the virtual platform, another quick poll. What is your confidence in using the virtual platform's engagement features? Joe, if you could launch that, please. Thank you. So a lot of you were in that moderate to high confidence in your ability to facilitate. You should see about the same in your ability to utilize and leverage the engagement features. And actually, we're a little bit better. More of you are moderate and highly confident than in the low category than you were in your ability to facilitate. So that's interesting. That's really cool. So most of you feel pretty confident and familiar with the Zoom features. Good. All right, go ahead and share those results, Joey. And let's dive in really quickly to the features. Again, we've utilized and talked about a lot of them. Again, we're not going to have time for breakout rooms today, but breakout rooms are a phenomenal tool to be able to use in your training programs, right? Gives you the ability to split out into smaller groups, provide for smaller group discussions and activities that you can use to enhance the learning that is happening in the main room, right? Give them some tasks, some activities that they can do deeper dives within. You've seen me leverage polls throughout the course of today. These are fantastic. You can use single choice, multiple choice, short answer, long answer. There are a lot of different options that you can use and leverage throughout the course of your training. You've seen me use chat throughout the course of the day today. These are fantastic for quick check-ins, real-time Q&A. You can start discussions. You can drop things into the chat that you want people to download or navigate to. Screen sharing is fantastic as well. You can do demos there, again, sharing your deck. And it ties into the whiteboarding and annotation features as well, right? Anything that you're sharing on screen, as long as you have annotations active, people can write on the screen and highlight things that they find important. Now, I will say that I'm not a huge fan of whiteboarding, the whiteboard feature particularly. I'm someone who prefers the annotation feature. I will create a slide for people to annotate on with some type of instruction. Reactions and emojis are also an important engagement feature. I want you guys to think about the social media age that we are in. Everybody is familiar with using thumbs up, smiley faces, hearts. Absolutely leverage and utilize that throughout the course of your training. We used hand raising today, and of course, audio and video. You just saw a video, which I hope you guys found a little bit funny and engaging, but you can use that as a pattern interrupt to break up your delivery. Now, the one thing that I will say about recording is I don't feel that it is something that is super engaging. In fact, I feel that a lot of people who know that it's being recorded will actually pull back a little bit. So you'll want to take a moment to judge whether or not you feel that that will be a hindrance for engagement throughout the course of your training. Sometimes it needs to be recorded, and that's just what it is. But if you don't need to, you are likely to get more engagement if it's not recorded. There are some additional collaboration tools. I mentioned the apps button earlier where you can look at the timer. There are other apps that you can use to enhance engagement, things like Mentimeter, Kahoot, which is fantastic for gamification. Miro and mural boards are great collaboration tools. Poly and Poll Everywhere are a nice alternative to the Zoom polls. You can create word clouds and do different things within those as well. Again, not going to go super in depth into the roles because I think most of you know what a facilitator versus and a co-facilitator will do. But some of the things that a producer can obviously do are going to be set up and managing your registrations in your room, starting the meeting, conducting tech checks, running the polls, running breakout rooms, all of that stuff behind the scenes so that you as the facilitator can stay focused on engagement and delivering your content. Going to skip this poll again because we are at time and I want to end here on time. What would you say is one new best practice or pointer that you could potentially use from today that you'll take away into your next training? Pop that into the chat if you will. And while those come in, Taryn, annotations, I love it. Thank you. Let me wrap up by saying a friend of mine by the name of John Chen wrote a book called Engaging Virtual Meetings. And what he says, one of his number one tips is don't Zoom alone. Whether you're using a producer, a company like me, or you have somebody there simply in support, make sure that you have that support structure there. Be prepared, be proactive. How you show up matters. And again, use your tools for engagement every 3 to 7 minutes. Want to let you guys know that we do have some upcoming events here in April. If you're not already connecting me on LinkedIn, please do so and take a look at some of the events that we have coming up. April 3rd, I have a free webinar with Gerard Training Solution. Are leaders made or are they born? We have one that is going to be supporting suicide prevention as well on April 24th, yet to be posted, but it will. So please check those out on LinkedIn. Of course, this wouldn't be a free webinar without a few offers. So here are the offers. I'm going to be doing a hands-on virtual workshop along the lines of this free one on April the 23rd. Will be a $50 charge. However, the proceeds of that event will be going to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, a not-for-profit that I feel very, very passionate about. In the event that you'd like to leverage virtual producer services, Joey's going to go ahead and drop the link for that into the chat. When you submit the request, type in 25% off in the message and you will get a 25% discount on 2 one-hour virtual training programs that I will produce for you. If you'd like to get into designing your own masterclass, reach out. We can set you up with an instructional designer. And if you just want some advice on your existing training, reach out. We can schedule 30 minutes and we can talk through that. If you have any questions, I will stay on for as long as you guys want to answer those or chat with you for a bit. But please connect with me again on LinkedIn if we're not already. And that will wrap up our session today, only going 2 minutes over. So I feel pretty good about that. Hope you all enjoyed the session today. I will send out the recording as soon as it's done. Hope you have an enjoyable day. Take care, everybody. All right, I have disabled the forced mute and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.